20 years ago, Nine Inch Nails reached a turning point in their career. The band was going through a lot of problems, especially Trent Reznor. He was overcoming personal and legal problems. Not only that, the band took a different approach to recording and songwriting for the next album. He was inspired by some bands you wouldn't even expect him to be. In addition to that, the band also had some big-name musicians who played on this album. The lyrics also expressed lots of problems he was going through, and in the end, it became what could be arguably their best album since The Downward Spiral, so let's talk about it. Today I'm talking about With Teeth, the fifth studio album by Nine Inch Nails, released on May 3rd, 2005. The album was a result of Trent Reznor's struggle with addiction and legal battles. In other words, it was an album that would have never happened had he not overcome those battles. He decided to get sober and create one of the best albums of their career. The sound might be a little different, but what he did, it worked in the long run. But first, let's talk about why did he decide to get sober. Like many successful musicians, sometimes the rock and roll lifestyle catches up with you. Trent Reznor had a long and hard struggle with drugs and alcohol, especially cocaine and heroin. His addiction became worse in the mid-90s, which was a time when the band was at their peak after releasing albums like The Downward Spiral, which is an album that really accurately describes what he was going through. Things were at their worst during the late 90s, around the time the band released The Fragile. Ironically, another album title that described his current state. His lowest point during the Fragile tour was in the year 2000 when he overdosed on a type of heroin called China White. While he was in London, he thought it was just some regular cocaine. But that overdose was his wake-up call. At first, he didn't want to admit he had a problem with drugs and alcohol, but in 2001, he finally entered a rehabilitation center in New Orleans. He underwent various forms of treatment as well as 12-step programs and psychiatric help. It was a long road, but eventually he became sober. This led to the creation of the With Teeth album, which is the subject matter of today's video. But drugs and alcohol were not his only problem. Trent Reznor had to overcome some legal battles. In 2004, John Malm Jr., who was Trent Reznor's former manager, sued him for over $2 million in deferred commissions. He claimed that Trent Reznor reneged on contracts and refused to pay him royalties. So Trent Reznor filed a countersuit accusing John Malm of fraud and breach of his fiduciary duties. At first, John Malm was awarded 20% of Trent Reznor's gross earnings. That was even after John Malm stopped managing him. This also included earnings from album advances. John Malm also alleged that Trent Reznor gifted him 50% of the band's trademark rights. At that point, Trent Reznor realized that his financial situation was worse than he had thought. His liquid assets totaled about $400,000, which is barely anything, considering that he was one of the most successful bands of the 90s. But the story has a happy ending as he went to trial in 2005. The jury sided with Trent Reznor. He was awarded $3 million, and he had full control of his trademarks. If you adjust that to inflation, it would be about $5 million today. Despite the problems, he had a creative vision for this new album. It was time for Trent Reznor to start writing and creating demos for the album With Teeth. He decided to set up in Los Angeles. He chose a minimalistic design. He opted for traditional songwriting. The demos were the basis for the final recordings. He wanted to take a different approach, but he didn't want to alienate his fans. You see, his previous style or previous albums like The Fragile had a very dense, layered production style. It was expected of him to do that again, but he went with his gut. He didn't want to rely on Pro Tools to fix everything. He wanted the album to sound raw. He had just overcome so many difficulties. He wanted the album to sound more human with all of its imperfections. He cited bands like Gang of Four, The Stooges, Iggy Pop. They were his inspirations. He wanted to create this imperfection or the feel of a live performance instead of this heavily edited digital music. The end product was an album that sounded like a live performance that was recorded with analog gear instead of the perfect digital album. But it wasn't just Trent Reznor in the studio by himself. He found help in unexpected places. Most of the album was created by Trent Reznor, included vocals, songwriting, arrangement, production, engineering, sound design, and he played all instruments, but there was one person who played one of the instruments. Trent thought it would be a good idea to get a real drummer instead of just using programmed beats. So he thought about who could he ask to play drums on this album. The answer was Dave Grohl. He played on the album. He asked him. Dave said yes. Then Dave would play on 7 of the 13 tracks. Trent thought that Dave had the perfect drumming style for the music he wanted to make. In the end, the album had more of a live feel, and Dave and Trent would go on to collaborate on future projects. But how does the album With Teeth hold up 20 years later? I decided to give the album a listen again, just one more time, and let's talk about it. So, it's always been one of my favorite albums by the band. There were a few songs I used to add to my gym playlist back in the day. I used to download songs from iTunes. I noticed some of the songs reminded me of albums like The Downward Spiral, like the opening track, All the Love in the World, and also the song The Collector. There was even a melody in the song Every Day is Exactly the Same that reminded me of the song Closer. Then there were songs that reminded me more of a Pretty Hate Machine, like the track You Know What You Are. Despite the similarities to other albums, I thought it made the album more enjoyable and not just sound derivative. I thought the album sounded very fresh and new. It captured the raw sound they were going for. I also felt the album had a very cohesive sound and every song belonged on the album. But what about the songs with Dave Grohl on drums? Dave Grohl played on 7 of the 13 tracks. A lot of these were the ones I mentioned already, like the percussion on the opening track, All the Love of the World, which I believe also had electronic drums. There were sections where you can hear the more natural drum sound. There were also fast and aggressive drumming on the track You Know What You Are, the industrial drum beats on The Collector, the traditional rock drumming on Every Day is Exactly the Same. There was also a grungy sound on Getting Smaller, a catchy drum beat on Sunspots, and slow and droning style of The Line That Begins to Blur. So given that Dave performed on 7 songs, it means there were a few songs with programmed drums. I did some research. All I found was that Rupert Parks did some drum programming on the track All Love in the World, so some songs sounded more like the previous Nine Inch Nails albums. In the end, most of the drumming on the album sounds like real drums, which is a standout on the album. In all honesty, anything that Dave Grohl plays on will always be good, because he is an awesome drummer. But now you may be wondering, what about Trent Reznor's vocals? And what did I think of them? Trent Reznor, he uses a lot of different vocal styles throughout the albums. And many tracks have soft singings like All the Love in the World and With Teeth. And there are some aggressive vocals on tracks You Know What You Are and Love Is Not Enough. Some vocals sound like rapping on a few songs, like the tracks Only and Love Is Not Enough. I didn't mind them, but I might see how it could turn away some fans. But in general, he gives a great vocal performance. It's a very emotional delivery. He shows off a lot of emotion on the album, like anger and aggression, but despite this, he showed off his softer side as well. Now, I mentioned a few songs I had on a gym playlist back in the day, so let's talk about those. 20 years ago, I spent a lot of time working out in the gym. I used to download songs from iTunes. If you remember, they used to cost $1 a song, so I would download songs that I bought for $1, and I would make these workout mix CDs that I would burn. 20 years ago, I was listening to a lot of different music. It was not all metal, it was rock, pop, rock, everything else, anything that was popular. But there were 2 songs from this album that I used to have on repeat back when I used to go to the gym. And the first song was The Hand That Feeds. Very catchy song, has some great hooks. I like the electronic beats. A perfect song for the gym playlist. The song also has some cool Tom Morello style guitar sounds. And it had a pretty cool music video. Let's take a little quick look at that. This is the music video for The Hand That Feeds. Pretty cool with all those wires. I think they wanted to express that he was working with his analog equipment. And it's very 2000 sounding. It has that retro, almost VHS quality. It's a pretty cool video. That's why I always like this song. The second song is Only, another cool song with an awesome drum beat and electronic piano and a great bass line. The song has everything from a catchy chorus to cool electric guitar licks. This one also has a music video with some pretty cool items. So here are a couple of clips I have of that one. Here's another music video for Only. It has that really 2000s laptop, all those gifts that you would buy in the shopping mall. And the screensaver, those were pretty cool. And also that thing there where you used to like stick your face in it. I'll probably do another clip of that and I'll show you that in a minute. And here's a second clip I made that shows this thing that we used to buy at these gift shops. So take a look at this. Here's another clip from the Only music video. Remember those things when you would go to the shopping mall? I think it was like Spencer's Gifts or something, and you would stick your face in those things with all the pins. That was pretty cool, and that was part of the music video. Now, it's usually around this time when I direct you to another video where I did of the same artist, but surprisingly, it's the first album review I did for 9 Inch Nails. I did a video talking about my favorite industrial metal albums, and I mentioned a very important album by 9 Inch Nails. I will stick that right there. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. Give it a like and all that good stuff. See you in the next one.